Let's begin with pricing. The president isn't talking about drug prices any longer, at least not for the moment. But there remains a great deal of interest in how drugs are priced. And drug markets appear to be getting increasingly competitive. From your perspective, how have the dynamics changed?
Over the last year? Well, I think we did, as an industry, I think rein in some of the most egregious actions. Those weren't mostly from innovative companies, but we didn't see the headline-grabbing massive price increases last year. And that's a good thing. We all get painted with that brush. We've done some work with payers as an industry, and certainly Lilly, to try to help patients afford their medications at the pharmacy counter. So, for instance, Lilly announced a program to discount insulins for anyone who shows up at the counter by 40%. If you're a cash payer, you're in a high deductible plan. We need more of that kind of innovation because, of course, as you know, the insurance system is bearing less and less the cost of medications, and that's being shifted to consumers. So we need to innovate and create new ways for people to afford the medication at the counter. Even if they have insurance, their prices are going up. I think the final thing is new pricing on new innovation. And last year we saw tremendous new scientific breakthroughs, gene therapies, et cetera. And this
but it's expensive.
It is expensive to do. You have expensive development programs for a small group of people. How to spread out that cost, how to back value of those, and make sure that the healthcare system is paying for something that works. We need more room for experimentation. CMS, which sets the guidelines in the U.S. for a lot of that, has been a little slower than what I would have expected in coming out with new frameworks to do that. But I would expect some action this year from them to allow drug companies to do different things, for instance, spreading out payments over a longer period of time, or value
Even if the
pricing.
Upfront cost is very high.
Or value pricing, saying pay us when it works, not when it doesn't.
Indication-based or outcome-based pricing.
Exactly, yeah. So we're still waiting for some of those policy moves, but I would expect them coming up.
Can you do any of that on your own?
We do that on our own. The places where it can work are in the so-called advantage plans, where you have a plan provider for a senior that has all of the costs, and they have some latitude to trade off hospitalization costs for drug expenditures. And in some, I would say, forward-looking commercial plans, typically on the coasts, who own all the costs and really want to see movement toward a value-based scheme. So we have several dozen of these, particularly in diabetes, where we take the risk on lowering blood glucose, and we get paid when the drugs actually work.
The impression people have is that you feel pricing pressure most acutely in diabetes. Is that the case? And where else do you feel it?
Well,
where is it coming? Maybe that's maybe more important.
Yeah, it's interesting in diabetes because we get more questions from media, of course, on diabetes pricing. Consumers are bearing more and more of the cost of their diabetes medications, but that's not necessarily because of a price increase. It's because of a shift to high deductible plan designs, both through the ACA as well as in commercial insurance. At the same time, investors say, can you hold pricing in diabetes? Looks like it's coming down. So it's a bit of a paradox. Prices for us in diabetes have been very stable. We haven't had big fluctuations. What is happening is patients are bearing more of the cost, and there is a lot of competitive pressure in that market.
You can't talk about pricing without talking about pharmacy benefit managers. You've been among those critical of the role that PBMs play in the drug supply chain. How would you fix it?
Well, I think one principle that I would encourage my colleagues in the PBM industry to adopt is to really make their return, to add the value based on what they do for their sponsors, which is administrate formularies and process claims, not based on plan designs that allow them to make money on the transaction of the drug itself. So based on these high deductible schemes, sometimes the PBM or the insurance company is actually making money on the drug being filled, and that seems upside down to us. What they should do is act more like Visa or MasterCard and get paid on the claims processing, not necessarily on the sale of the medication.
Do regulators need to step in here?
Perhaps. It's a concentrated market. So one thing I've said frequently in media and to investors is we would welcome more competition in that market so that people with different models, like the one I just described.
So you like the idea of Anthem starting its own PBM?
Yes, actually. And the model where PBMs are owned by insurance companies, some say, well, shouldn't you worry about consolidation? But actually, that's a better scheme for us because whenever we can have a conversation with the payer about their pharmacy costs and their medical costs, we're able to get into that value-based pricing discussion. When they're separated, we're a line item in the pharmacy budget. It's more a procurement decision. It's a tougher environment for us.
So Aetna CVS, from Lilly's perspective, is a thumbs up.
It's neutral, I'd say. We like the combination of PBM and insurance. On the other hand, here you have one less entity to deal with, more concentration. That's tougher to sell into.
Dave, what is Lilly going to do with the tax windfall that comes out of the recently signed piece of legislation?
Well, the effects of the tax reform will allow us to repatriate cash we've kept overseas, which is something a lot of companies did to keep your global rate down. What we've said is we're going to follow the priorities we've laid out before for capital allocation. First, we're going to invest in our own business, plants, equipment, and R&D spending.
More investment?
Yeah, I would expect so. Second, we're going to look at M&A and business development to build our pipeline. That's really our focus, not to bolt on a business, but to really build a broader pipeline in places like oncology, immunology, and diabetes. And third, we'll return it to shareholders. So we'll follow those priorities. There are lots of opportunities to invest in our business and lots of business development to do. And so we'll have to work through that as the year progresses.
You have an idea of what it's going to mean to you financially. Once you account for what you plan to invest, once you account for what you'd like to set aside for M&A and other strategic initiatives, what percentage of that is going to be left over to return to shareholders?
Yeah, we haven't spoken publicly about that yet, but there'll be a bit in each.
Opportunity.
Right, but we have our earnings call at the end of the month, and we're going to probably comment a little bit more on that then, along with the new rate we expect to pay and how much cash we'll be paying to the U.S. government. Let's not forget, repatriating is expensive, 15.5% on the cash. How much a charge we'll expect for that?
A specific or a question for you about one specific drug, Trulicity. Lilly has one of the best growth trajectories in big pharma. It's been widely acknowledged. Yep. But a lot of that future hinges on the success of Trulicity. I'd like to know, how confident can you remain in what you anticipate from that drug, given the fact that there's a rival product from Novo Nordisk?
Yes.
And the outcome data it has demonstrated are good, particularly in cardio, which is something you're still in trials over.
Yes, that's true. We have a cardiovascular outcome study that will read out late this year in 2018, and we're excited to see that. Let's remember the competition from Novo. They have two products in the class. One of them does have a cardiovascular claim. That's the daily form, Victoza. Whereas the weekly form does not have that in their label. It was a small study. It points in the right direction, but they'll have to repeat that to get the claim. We like our competitive position primarily because we have a lot of momentum, as you point out, and ease of use. So we know people with diabetes struggle with daily injections. They struggle with monitoring their glucose, pricking their finger. Trulicity offers the convenience of a once-a-week shot. You never see the needle. You just put the device to your skin, and it goes. And it's very effective medication. So we expect continued growth through Trulicity. Of course, diabetes is a big part of the Lilly story. That's not the only part. Jardiance, another breakthrough. We've got a number of products coming, including an ultra-rapid insulin and a new glucagon product as well. So it's exciting for us in diabetes. We welcome competition, though. I think it helps get the products to more patients.
Scott Gottlieb is shaking things up at the FDA.
Yes.
Does that play to Lilly's advantage, or does it make competitive dynamics more challenging for you with drugs being approved at a faster rate?
Well, so we have long argued for a more competitive situation through the FDA to avoid regulatory barriers to entry, starting with generic markets, where when he took over, there was almost a 4-year backlog in generic approvals, and that makes generic markets inefficient, and payers can save money, consumers can save money if they relieve that. He's doing that. On innovative therapies, we welcome breakthrough designation, more rapid and adaptive regulatory pathways. That does have the effect of increasing competition on incumbents because you're speeding up new therapies, but we're here to do that. That's what the industry exists to do. Although it makes business tough on you, if we can't out-innovate ourselves, if we can't speed up our own innovations to create something better for patients, then we have a different kind of problem. So we welcome it overall, even though it does put pressure on our business sometimes.
We all want to see innovation.
Yes.
The world needs more successful therapies.
Absolutely.
And medicines. But with the cost of developing and marketing a new drug at, Deloitte says, $2 billion, doesn't the changing dynamic at the FDA create the risk that there'll be too many companies developing too many medicines to treat the same problem?
It could be,
and
although
crowding effectively.
What you would hope is that, and so you see this in oncology today, right, where life cycles of oncology products now can be just a few years because you can launch successfully in a therapeutic space, an indication and line of therapy, and then someone can come on top of you with something better. if I'm a patient, I say, good, I now have another option. The economics of that, I think, gets solved by big companies saying, let's invest in other therapy areas with less competitive noise. And there's plenty of unmet need out there. Disease is unfortunately boundless still. We have so much room to go. Areas like neuroscience, where there isn't enough investment, I would say, to conquer the problems we face in neuroscience, or even back to cardiometabolic. I mean, there's diabetes is competitive, but it's not nearly as competitive as oncology. So that's the answer for big companies, just to think about how you allocate your R&D budget to places that are less competitive, but there's still significant unmet need.